Welcome to How to Be a Real One Percenter. This is a podcast where we're really redefining what it means to be ultra successful. No longer the obsessive, blinded pursuit of one form of success at the expense of everything else, but just learning to be our authentic selves, or dedicated to being authentic, living our authentic lives, and are achieving our desired success in all aspects of life, both externally and internally. And most importantly, perhaps, uh, just learning to love this experience called life. I am really delighted to have my guest joining today from the beautiful Gold Coast of Australia, Christie Whitehill. So, Christie, firstly, just thank you so much. I know how busy you are. And thank you for making the time to be on this podcast. I've been really looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks, Shrita. Me too.
Awesome. Well, we might have quite a bit to talk about, and I have been looking forward to this, Christy, because I went back and looked at when did we actually start our talking about the 1% journey, and I was thinking it was 10
Oh,
years ago, but it's actually a bit longer.
longer.
So it was longer. It was
Man,
24 early 2014.
that's right. Yeah. Where are we at now? I don't know.
Well, pretty soon, coming up on
Yeah.
11 years that we've
11
been having
years.
this chat about. Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to seeing where this goes and
Mm.
and what comes out. And you've just done so many things. Like when I think about back then and where you are now, and all the different aspects that you've gone down roads. And one thing I talk about the real 1% journey is possibly the most important aspect of it is courage. And
Mm.
I was just reflecting on your journey that I've been a part of over the last 11 years, and looking at that there isn't anything that you haven't been willing to go down the road and have the
Mm.
courage. And consequently all the different aspects of your life that you've how do you say, put under the microscope, examined, looked in the
Yeah.
mirror,
Yes.
um,
Oh, gone deep.
and gone deep, which we'll talk about whatever you feel comfortable with today. But when I look at your life now, and I look at what you've done and some of the things which I'm really quite excited for having those things be talked about on the podcast too. Like, it's just really when people come on the podcast, it's a time for reflection, for me. And I think about the journey that we've had together. And when I think about yours, it's just like, wow, how inspiring. So, well, let's jump in.
Thank you.
And my first question for you really is just what we didn't call it the 1% journey back then, but really, if you look at it, that's what it's
Mm.
always been, is the real 1% journey that we've spoken about. And the first question, really, Christy, is what brought you to the 1% journey? So, if you take a trip down memory lane, what was happening, and what brought you to the journey?
Great question. I've always really had this inkling and this knowing that uh, in order to really attract and manifest what you want in life, there's just this inner work that you need to do in order to do so. And I think for me, from just my early childhood and the experiences that I had early on, and beliefs that were formed throughout, you know, those years, when I came into, my early 20s, and I really started to uncover and discover personal growth work, business, and all of those interests that I now practice daily and do daily. uh, I really saw just the profound impact that by doing the inner work, it can really have such an impact on what you're trying to achieve in life and how you can help others. And
Mm.
so I think that's what really led me to you and the work that we did early on. I was really experiencing some challenges uh, during that time. And it had to do with relationships, and that's why we met. And you know, there were so many layers that needed to be uncovered, and so many of my own beliefs and, limiting beliefs they were, that I had to really uncover and really dissolve in order to really get into my true authentic self. And I definitely didn't nail it at the time. I think over the years, this work is a daily practice. It's
Mhm.
something that you really need to dedicate to in order to, yeah, continue to see the results in your life, because it doesn't end. And I think we are always coming up against challenges in life, and we're always coming up against things that might trigger us. And for me, when I those things come up, I kind of see them as a bit of a blessing, because it just
Mm.
shows me things that I need to work on. And so I think that's why I love the work that we do together, because I think especially working with a coach and a facilitator or somebody that can help you to really dig deep and uncover those can really help, help you on your journey.
Yeah, wow, what a great intro and start to the conversation. So, when you talk about limiting beliefs, for someone who, like, it's becoming more known now that we, what's between the ears there and possibly deeper in what we call the unconscious mind or subconscious mind can be these blocks. But what more can you say about when you say limiting beliefs? Yeah, can you say a bit more about what you noticed or what you mean by those?
So I guess they're like unconscious thought patterns. For me, recently, I guess I could use the example of one that came up in one of our sessions. Was I discovered that I had this unconscious belief that I don't matter. And
Mm,
like, how damaging can that be? If that's
yeah,
running in the background and you're trying to achieve something, or you're trying to really yeah, well, achieve your goals, and you've got a belief like I don't matter in the background. Like, how is that going to impact your relationships and your work and all of that kind of stuff? And once we uncovered where that came from and where it really stemmed from, um, and as an adult looking back on it, you're like, wow, when you go back and you look at where did that come from, and how much impact did that have on me throughout my life, you're like, I want to get rid of all those because
yeah,
really they don't serve you. And what I think we've realized too, we've had some pretty powerful conversations recently, and I just realized like how important self talk and positive self talk is, because yeah, it can just have such an impact. And even over the years, some of those beliefs that I had, one being formed through my pregnancy, sorry, my birth with my first child, Zach. I experienced a 16-hour labor. I didn't dilate. I ended up having emergency C-section. It was quite an ordeal. And I remember that in that moment, I was just so devastated with myself and so like angry at myself for not being able to birth my child naturally, which is just ridiculous, right? Because we live in a world where these medical interventions can save you. And, obviously there was a reason. And through the work that we did, I got quite unwell as well. If you remember, like, for
yeah,
quite a few years that and it wasn't until we did a session I realized I'd formed this belief during that birth that my body fails me. And so
yeah.
when I became unwell with gut issues, and and during the pregnancy of my second child, I became very unwell and had serious health complications. That having a belief like my body fails me is not going to help me heal, is it? So
Definitely
you
not.
know, I so when I'm talking about those limiting beliefs, that's just a few, and they were major, powerful ones that had major impact on me and my physical, my body, my physical body. And me being now in the health industry, I really realized how much those beliefs can have if they are serving you.
Well, and I just think about being a male for a woman just having a baby in whatever way that you're going to have a baby. I can't imagine like just I think you deserve like a medal, or some sort of whatever the highest kind of honor is. You deserve that for just doing it. So to come out of it
Yeah.
with that, that is quite the impact. And well, Christy, we also know, from that for those that might not know, and there'll be a lot that are watching or listening that do know that you're an entrepreneur, as well as quite a great entrepreneur. You're a wife and mother. You have, a great. Hopefully, going to talk a bit more about the brand and some of the businesses that you've done some incredible things in the business world as well. What I'd like to do is, if you think about it, you mentioned the impact of that story. I do want to say too, just quickly before that, before I ask you the question, you did some real work because we'd been digging for quite some time. When we introduced this call, and it's been 11 years. That story that you found, that you're not important, like we'd come around it,
Mm,
but it took,
mm,
you just kept digging and digging until that one, and to uncover that level of story is I just see the change in you, like it's something that's just
yeah,
fundamentally changed when you got that one.
it's a big one.
What it was a big one, and I think about
Mm,
just the effort that you've taken. You talked about daily practice and continuing to do that, and I think that's what allowed you to get to that depth of level where you've got something life changing. But before we go to how it changed, well, if you look at those different areas that we spoke about, business and family, and you talked about relationships and pregnancy. Well, if you look back, how did that story, of impact all of those different areas? How did it
mm,
impact you?
mm. Yeah, so really, I noticed it impacting me the most when I got pregnant with my second child, Ava, who's now 5. And at the time, I was building a company called Tech Ready Women, which recently I exited to a company called Scolari Partners. And so I had that business for 7 years. But throughout building that business, I actually had the two kids, so Zach and Ava. Zach's now 8. And I mean, having children anyway is another job in itself. And so to build a
Mm,
business and a startup at the same time was very taxing. And so I was working long hours. I wasn't looking after myself as I should have been from a nutritional perspective, getting enough sleep and all that kind of thing. And so throwing a couple of babies in on top, definitely for me, a recipe for burnout, and that's where I
yeah.
was at the time. And so by the time Ava, I was pregnant with Ava, and remembering I had it, had that traumatic birth experience with Zach, which at the time I didn't feel like, even though it was pretty chaotic and it was pretty traumatic, I didn't realize I'd formed a belief like that. And it wasn't until I experienced those health issues as I was burning out from a bit of overexhaustion and working at the time. And so following the birth of Ava and starting those symptoms really starting to come out, I was doing all, I went to see the naturopaths, doctors, I probably went to 5 different practitioners and doctors, and I did every protocol that they would tell me to do, and I would follow it like a T. But it wasn't until like 2 years into trying to heal my gut and over these symptoms that had come up, like I was experiencing fatigue, light fog, brain, sorry, light fog, brain fog, light sensitivity, fatigue, uh, was just like depression, anxiety, so many different symptoms. And it was quite debilitating at the time. And but after 2 years of doing all these protocols, I was like, why am I not getting better?
Yeah.
And and that's when I started going back to set work, and I reached out to you and I was like, Shrita, I'm not getting better. Like, why is
Mm,
this? And then we started working on looking at what could have been those stories that I was really telling myself. And it was interesting because I remember when we uncovered that belief of, my body fails me, and realized that I was really treating myself not in a nice way. I was not talking to myself nicely at all.
no.
All of
Mm,
a sudden, my symptoms started disappearing and I was starting to get better. And it just, yeah, it just started dissipating, and I started getting my energy back and, motivation. And I just think the correlation between your mind and your body is just so strong. And it doesn't matter what you could do physically if you're not also working on your mindset. Like, obviously, it's all a holistic approach, but if you're not
yeah.
also working on your mindset while you're trying to heal, feed your body good food, drink plenty of water, get sleep, all that kind of stuff your body does need, you know, it'll take a long time. And so now I'm like, anytime a symptom like will come up, I'm actually quick to go, okay, what emotional thing have I got going on right now? Or, that could be in correlation, or, as well as looking at food intake and that kind of thing. But it's just all linked, and it's so important to look at it holistically.
Oh, you're just saying something so important right now, Christy, because we don't still, I think, as a mainstream society, we don't look at it like when we have something going on with our bodies, we do look at just the physical side of things. And what you're saying
Mm,
right now is so important because if we don't understand that aspect of it, there's an
mm,
exercise. I know you've done it before, but it's quite demonstratable. When you take the lemon, so you close your eyes and
mm,
you act
yeah,
like you tell yourself, well, I've got a half cut lemon in my hand and it's really really juicy and it's got a lot of seeds in it, and you take a bite of it, and when you do, it's like your body processes. I know my body
yeah,
actually creates saliva to, and you look at your hand and there's no lemon, right? And it really goes
mm,
to show that the mind doesn't distinguish between actual reality and what we're telling it.
mm,
And if we're telling ourselves, and as you said, and I'm so thankful for you sharing at this level, as you said, it's these unconscious thoughts. If they're repetitive thoughts that, hey, we're not important, or we're not worthy, or not good enough, or
mm,
it's our fault that like you said, it's your fault for the pregnancy, etc., and blaming ourselves for things, what's our body going to do with that information, right? It's going to
mm,
tighten up, it's going to tense, and of course it's going to start to not work as well as it could. And when you think about
yeah,
over time, it just gets more and more and more. So yeah,
mm.
I didn't. As I said, I know this conversation could go so many different places, and I should have known with you that we would have gone to health, because you're. Well, look, we're going to at some point talk about Into Wellness, your health brand that you're launching and doing amazing things with. But I think before we get there, perhaps let's go through the journey a little bit more, because I'm remembering just back in the early days, when you had Tech Ready Women, you had some other businesses, and I'm just thinking about, like, we'll just go wherever you want to go, and we don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go. But I just, when you think about your story and, the not important and all the different aspects that are around that, I just think about some of those early days, about some of the chats we had about business. And, you know, um, uh, it's like we have these motives, right? When we have these stories, then we're not doing things just because we love to do them. We're not building a business just to
Mm,
build it. And I remember our chats, if you're willing to go there, about, you were going for the big thing, right? It was always the big thing. And can you see the story involved in that? Like, I mean, well, or remember our chats about how, yeah, what can you say something about motives? Because I think this is something I didn't say just before you answer is, a lot of this work has to do with what we don't know. Like, when I had my
mhm,
turnaround in life from drug addiction and everything else that I went through, I quickly realized that I needed to understand a realm called what I just don't know. I don't know. So I knew what I knew, and I knew what I didn't know, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And that was the area where all the change really happened. And that's really the area that we work with in our conversations. And this is why I'm asking for a bit more information from you, because a lot of people just won't even know that they're operating a business from a place of
mm,
having a motive behind it, instead of just something they do. So do you remember those days? And if so, what could you say
mhm,
to the people that are
mm.
viewing this about that?
Yeah, in the early days, so I started my first business when I was 26, and I've always been quite an entrepreneurial mindset. So I was somebody who didn't, well, I pretty much almost failed high school. So I was put into the category of, you're not smart enough or good enough. And, I even had a teacher tell me, you should go and marry somebody. you know, off you go. Um, because I was quite, dyslexic, and I learned by doing. And we all know that that's not, well, back then, especially, was the way school taught. And so I really didn't fit in. And so I definitely, in my younger years, had some beliefs around, I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough. Also, my relationship with my parents as well definitely came into play on, they were entrepreneurs, always quite busy. And yeah, definitely felt of abandonment and neglect and not getting enough attention throughout those years. And I think that was a big driver for me wanting to start business, was to have I'm trying to prove myself a worthy,
Mm,
right? Or trying to prove that I am smart enough.
mm,
Back in the day, I was skinny modeling, and, was very much about my looks, and everyone, even though I was doing retail management and doing some things in like in the business side, but it was always about how I looked and that kind of thing. And so when I actually started my first business, I had this huge drive to prove that I was good enough and smart enough. And especially entering a male dominated industry like the tech
mm,
industry,
mm,
it was even more so, because literally I would be the only woman in the room at any kind of meetup or any business meeting. And I was this 20 something blonde girl who was very ambitious and very optimistic about my big goals that I had, which were probably really unrealistic for the stage that I
Mm.
was at. It's not a bad thing in terms of like at least giving yourself the courage to hope, but it definitely was detrimental in that it can cause a lot of stress because you're like, well, realistically, to get to Richard Branson's level at that stage with no experience, and not just history, work history as well. I think for an entrepreneur, the journey of entrepreneurship is so different for everybody because everyone comes into it with different skill sets, different experiences, different experiences on how to manage businesses versus what they were doing in their past work. But for me, I'd worked in retail management, so I had a sales and I know how to sell things, but that was about it. And it was entering a tech startup industry in that time, which at the time was 2011, so apps were just getting on the app store, and I had these big ambitions. Everyone was saying $1 billion unicorn. So I'm like, well, if he can do it, which was, but then now when I look back, I'm like, I actually don't want to build $1 billion business because I've got
Mm.
nothing to prove anymore. Like I think over those years, like I remember doing a few sessions with you on that. Like, what is the drawback of that kind of, because that requires a lot of attention just on business. We all know that you put a lot of energy in one area, that's where you're going to excel. And I think for me, I did for years put a lot into, like, I was working 60, 70-hour weeks, easy 70-hour weeks, weekends. This is pre-kids. And that
Mm.
kind of effort is required in order to get skill set and things like that. But it's not sustainable to do for a long time. And yes, I could build $1 billion business, but maybe I'm not going to have that lifestyle that I also want. It's just, I remember doing the work on values versus, you know, the realistic, how, yeah, just being real on what it actually takes. And did I actually want? I think that's really important for any entrepreneur to think about when they are building businesses as to what is their goals, like, and what are their values and how does that align with the lifestyle you want as well as the business you want to create.
Yeah, I mean, look, we often talk about, what do you want, but what do you really want? And it's a lot of times people get something
Mm,
that they think they want, and then it becomes one of the worst things that ever happens to them because they weren't aware of all the things that were going to come along with it. So I use the term gold in
mm,
here, Christy, in this podcast quite a lot because, there's just gold nuggets that are being shared. And I had a feeling there'll be quite a bit of gold coming from you. And there already has been, and I think this is one where it's worth just putting a bit of a spotlight on this because you think about how many people, you said a few things there, it's, when I started in the business world, it was, for what I do, it was like, see if there's somebody out there that wants to have a difference. I had some great things I could share with them. Is there somebody that wants to have a difference? And then, maybe then there's another person to do that. And then there's, perhaps, hopefully that when it did, it grew into more and more. But now when I talk to business people, it's like, yeah, they want their first business to be that $1 billion business. And it's like, well, there's a lot you have to go through to get to that. I mean, I often say, Richard Branson wasn't Richard Branson at the beginning. He was just learning like the rest of
mm,
everyone that started in business, and he obviously had some mad skills in doing that, as you do. But it's experience and growing, and I think what you're saying about that, and also doing it to prove it instead of that's what we
mm,
truly want, and B, not actually seeing that there's a massive cost to that. And if it's what you really want, if somebody just says, look, all I want with this in this life is I want to build this amazing billion or multi-billion dollar business. That's what I want to do. I understand all the quote unquote sacrifices involved, but I love doing
mm,
that, and that's what I want to do. Then that's great. But I find that that's not the case. Like, I've worked with a lot of very successful people, and I find that that's not the case. But
mm,
the ones who do get there find out, oh, I didn't realize it was going to cost me that, and I didn't
mm,
realize that was going to happen. But how many people, Christy, do you reckon, and this is why we're doing this podcast, how many people actually are able to or know to or ask the questions, let me get what I think I have to prove to everyone else out of the way. Let me get what
mm,
I think I need to do out of the way. Let me get my stories out of the way and just sit with this. I've got a precious life here. what do I really, really want to do with it? What would I love to get up every day and do? And I think that's what's inspiring, because from going there in the beginning and having that, and the work that you did have been doing all along, and I call it disengaging or disidentifying from that story and knowing that it's not you,
Mm.
bit by bit. I'm just watching
It's
your
been a
life.
fantasy, a fantasy. I had a fantasy on this success, I remember. And
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, there are sacrifices when it comes to trying to build something like that. And also, like, the motive, I think, for me was not right. Now, when I look at, when you sit down and you go, actually, what do I want to do with my life? And it's really just about who do I want to serve and why, rather than what is
Yeah.
this outcome of what I'm trying to achieve from a business goal or perspective. It's a, how many people can I impact and help these days,
And
which is way more
that'll make you
rewarding.
the most successful, right? That'll also make you the most
Yeah.
successful when you're coming from that. What can I do, rather than it's about you. So yeah,
Mm,
interesting that you said that. Like, it's a fantasy, and it's mind blowing to me how many people are actually doing what we're doing because of a fantasy, because we
yeah.
think it's going to mean something if we do it, and then we just we wake up one day and say, well, look, this is my precious time. This is our
Mm,
greatest asset in life, is our time. That's what we never get
mm,
back. And it's what do we want to do with it. And I think what you're saying is just so important to that. So what would you say, Christy? So you've done quite a number of things. The work that I do with the people I work with is quite varied. You talked about values. For me, I call that clarity now, and that's really the work of just really getting to the heart and connected with who am I, and what do I really want with life, which is a significant piece of work. But to say it's worth it is, I think, an understatement. There's a whole bunch of different aspects of it. What would you say, because you've done so much of it and you've delved so deeply in it, what would you say to someone out there who's just not, something about the work, something about what you've learned that, we didn't know kind of thing, that you would share with people that could help them make a difference in their life, if they're there saying, look, I want to live my greatest life. I want to find out who I really am and what I really want. What would you say? What part of the work has, or what you've done with it, has stood out to you that you would share?
mm. Yeah, so I think that it's really important to not only surround yourself with the right people, have the right mindset, and, you know, help you to do that in. I think that is really, for me, has been number one. I think when you do realize and you go on this journey, quite a long journey, right? Because not everyone's work, and I think that's why you become a 1%, or you're a 1%er, right? Is this journey is not easy, and so, and sometimes in your darkest fears and challenges, or looking at emotions, or have impacted you or triggered you, or looking at situations and scenarios that may have caused you some stress. Like, sometimes that is hard work, right? It is not easy, and sometimes it's not really doable on your own. And I think working with coaches like yourself, as well as surrounding yourself with people who are also doing the work, can help you to fast track that process. I think for me, when I do the work, I see the results tenfold. Like, the investment in myself is the number one thing, because yeah, you just see so much results. And so I think it's really important to, if you're on this journey, to be really investing in yourself, surround yourself with the right people, and people that know how to help you to get the results, because ultimately you are going to see success from that. It's a win-win. Bettering yourself, or working on yourself, it only makes the world a better place, for yourself, in your mind, but also for other people.
Yeah, well, the world really is in our mind, isn't it? Because the world that's in
Yep.
our mind is the one that we project and the one that we see and live in. So what would you say to someone? They say, well, how did you accomplish that? Like, what's something that you've done? You don't have to go to personally or whatever, or just go where you want to go, but or you just go wherever you feel. But when you say that you've done that, right? So you obviously have shared that you had some beliefs. We all do. We have limiting beliefs. If we just stop and investigate our thoughts, we'll see that many of them are debilitating. They're not encouraging to us to, and supportive of us achieving everything that we want. They're counterproductive. Like the stories you've been sharing. What When you say that you looked at it, what's something that you've done to have that change? What's something in the work that you'd say to people, hey, this is what you can do? Like someone sitting there going, I want that freedom. What's a, I won't say technique, but what's something that you've utilized that you could share with them that they could do?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the tools that we go through and the questions that you have set out have been really helpful in terms of helping look at what those limiting beliefs are, and I think of a process, right? Like by sitting with it and really trying to go back to some of those moments and uncover what maybe were you thinking at that time. Like there's definitely a process to that, and I think the questions that we go through can help uncover that. I think that's been really helpful for me. And then I think just the daily practice of positive self-talk, like that's something you can do on your own daily, like and really filling your mind with positive things. I'm always plugging into podcasts and reading books, and I've like really, especially when it comes to letting go, I think that's been a big control has been a big thing for me, like wanting to control things and the outcome of things. And so, recently I was reading a really great book called Letting Go, and practicing that. And I know we've done some work on letting go of like some of those limiting beliefs. I think it's just the biggest thing, right? And then that just creates so much freedom when you've got that freedom in your mind, and um you are thinking good thoughts. It just makes you feel good throughout the day, and energetically you are going to be much happier, and also then attract in much happier situations and people, and yeah, good things will come.
Good, good things come when you open yourself to it. Yeah, I'm really thankful that
Yeah.
you've painted a picture for us today, Christy. Which when you talked about your early life and your parents and what you felt you had to do, and really helping us to see, because I could see, before I started to get involved in this work, if I listened to someone saying about that, I'd be like, oh, do I have limiting beliefs? And I mean, some of us is just easy for us to see it, and others just go, what does that mean? Like
Mm,
limiting beliefs? I'm just thinking what I'm thinking. But I think you've done a great job of showing how they actually develop, through you
mm,
looking at your parents going, oh, well, that's who I have to be in order to be worthy, in order to be important. I have to do something like that. And then it backfires and leads to the opposite. And then we start, living our life and maybe not even knowing that we're being run by these
mm,
stories and these thoughts. And, and again, this is just gold to say what I'm hearing from you is the importance of just stopping and saying, what are they? Like coming to
mm,
understand, facing them. I know for myself without knowing it, before I became consciously aware of the limitations that or limiting thoughts like you're speaking about, I suppressed them. Like I tried to sort of act over the top of them and act like they weren't there, kind of thing, and just that was the only thing that I could do, and it was the worst thing that I could do because it just kept getting worse.
mm,
And but when I stopped and just faced them, like you're saying, that's really the first step, isn't it? Like, and to
mm.
actually say, hey, this is what's there, and get present to
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's some signs, right? So if you ask someone who's like, I don't have unconscious limiting beliefs, or I don't know that they're there, right? I think for me, when I know that I need to be doing the work a little more than usual, it's, I'll start to see signs, symptoms. It might come out in my relations. There'll be resistance, there'll be, challenges, a lot of challenges come up, there will be illness, and I really just now stop and I'll listen to my body, I'll listen to my thoughts, and journaling's a really good way to try to get out what might be going on in your mind all the time, and what stories you're continuously telling yourself. Like if you are continuously thinking negative thoughts, or projecting blame onto somebody, or um, you know not taking any kind of responsibility and people are reacting to you in a negative way, it might be a good sign to stop and go, okay, well, is there anything that I've got going on in a story perspective that I'm projecting, and write that down and write those things out, because that can be, those kind of situations where lots of negative things are happening, you're getting ill all the time. They're really good signs and symptoms that, hey, maybe I need to stop and see if there's a story or a pattern going on here. Especially if you keep repeating the same thing throughout your life and you're like, why does this keep happening to me? It's like, well, maybe we can stop and go, okay, what might be going on from a belief perspective, or a story perspective, that you're telling yourself, and that's why that action is still happening.
Yeah, well, that's definitely the next moment of gold there, Christy, because I don't know how many people would see that what is limiting in here is showing up out there, showing up in our bodies for one, and showing
Mm,
up in our relationships, in our work. Like that's probably a big thing for some people to take in, but it's true, isn't it? Like I
mm,
loved what you said. If something that keeps happening and it keeps happening, then it's worth looking at. Okay, well, I'm the one that's always there. What's going on in
yeah.
here that happens? And what's really interesting, I know you've experienced it and I have, is that when you do identify it and, as you're saying, let it go, or I call it disidentify from it, all of a sudden these things change. Like that situation doesn't
Mm,
keep showing up anymore. Or, as you said earlier, quite a profound thing, the body changes as a result of, like, whatever it is that's showing up, it actually changing the inside changes the outside. And it's still something I
yeah.
think people are getting onto, but it's a long way to go for us to understand just how powerful we are. And yeah, again, it's why I did this podcast and why I'm so thankful for you sharing that kind of thing, because that can make a big
Yeah.
difference.
I think health conditions are a big one for a sign to stop and really start to look after yourself, your mindset, your body, everything. I think so. If you, it's just the first thing that comes out. Like for me, back in April, remember I got really ill. I contracted mycoplasma pneumonia on a flight over to Bali, and I got stuck in a hospital in Indonesia for 2 weeks in ICU. I've never been hospitalized for being sick before or had any
Yeah.
kind of serious illness like that. Like I've issues and things, but never been hospitalized in ICU. And I was there for 2 weeks. And I remember at the time, so I was prior to that, getting that ill, I was launched into wellness, into Mecca, that my business partner had gone and had a baby. So she wasn't there. Like she'd just gone on maternity. We're a startup. We've got a small team. We had a match into Mecca stores, 80 Mecca stores. I was selling my previous business, Tech Ready Women, to Scolari at the same time, and Dave was away traveling. And I was really starting to feel the stress and everything on my head. And I took the kids to Indonesia, got contracted something on the plane. Obviously, my immune system was down, went into hospital because I got so unwell. And I remember while I was in ICU by myself for 7 days, the kids, thankfully, because Dave was over in Europe traveling for work. And I remember sitting there and reflecting. I was hooked up to a ventilator, couldn't breathe, my chest was tight. And I remember thinking, wow, like, how do you get a typically healthy person, right? How do you get to this point? Obviously, a lot of build up, a lot of stress going on in my life at the time. Also selling a business that I had built, and I'd built a real idea around. And if you look up the spiritual meaning of uh, lung conditions, it actually means grief and transition. And
Mm.
I was like, wow, I was actually grieving, like just sort of, letting go of business that I had built, that I cared very much about. But it was such an emotional time for me to hand over something that I cared so much about to another couple. And I had so many fears, and it was no wonder I got that ill, like,
Mm.
and I remember being in the hospital and the doctors were like, how are you so sick? Like you were like a typically healthy person, no other
Mm.
condition. So it was a crazy time, and it was a very surreal time, but I actually was like, wow, what a process. Like, and I wrote some amazing letters to people that I'd worked with who had helped me build that business over the years, while I was in hospital, and wrote, wrote down a lot of things that I was so grateful for, and really just, it was such a process. So even though I was a very time, it was just such a beautiful time of practicing letting go and being at peace of like what was happening. And yeah, but I recovered really well after that. So that
Oh,
was good.
you've recovered incredibly well. And I didn't say recovered, you just turned that whole thing around into
Yeah.
utilizing it as an opportunity. When you even just think of saying that, it's not where most, I think it's not certainly how we're taught to think about illness, and it's just a
Mm,
bad thing. And then, we get over, but it's, I think what you're really offering here, that's another gold here, is that we've known for a long time that stress creates physical problems, right? That's in the medical world is quite
mm,
clear on that. Causes a whole bunch of different kinds of physical ailments. But what's really great here in this conversation and what you're saying is connecting the mind to it and what you were thinking. Things like fear and grief and emotional states,
mm.
and what's causing those emotional states was, I don't want to let the business go, or I'm losing a piece of myself, or whatever the case might be.
I'm losing it, my identity, like losing a part
That was what
of
happened. That's what
identity
we
that I had. Yeah,
I mean, this is how many people? It's like when you say, when we go to a party, or you go you're socially, what's the first question we ask somebody? What do you do? And it's like,
yeah,
what we do
yeah,
somehow becomes our identity, right? I mean, sometimes people ask me, because
yeah,
I'm just a
yeah,
fairly, I call it, I'm just truthful. And people say, what do you do? I go, I do lots of things. I hang out, and I go, oh, you mean, what do I do for my job? Oh, I'm a
yeah,
mindset and strategy consultant or whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's like it's that
yeah, you
identity,
straight
right?
to the
And
ego. Yeah,
yeah, I know one of the biggest things that happened for me was during the questions process that you referred to, and I share it bit by bit, sort of in the recap, because I do a recap of these podcast sessions, and just to put a little bit more context to some of the things that we've spoken about. And one of the biggest ones that I got was just realizing my business isn't me. Like it's just a business. Like it's a thing.
mm,
It's got nothing to do with who I am
mm,
as a person. But when we identify, like you're talking about, look at the impact that it can have. But I think what I'm hearing you say, even though you didn't use the words, is that through going through that process, you became free of it. And it's quite obvious looking at you now when you think about
mm,
how recent that was. It's quite obvious just in the way that your face is and how you look and your energy, that you've used that as an opportunity to
mm.
actually to move forward, and to get to connect with a new aspect of who you are. So it's really awesome to see. So, well, Chrissy, if
Yeah,
you've said a lot of really great
yeah,
things.
thanks.
What I think would be amazing just to hear is, like, as the journey, we've talked about 11 years, and you've talked about primarily today, which is really great. Again, I didn't know which part of the work that you were going to go to, but I should have known you'd focus on belief, addressing, because you've just done so much of it. And you've never shied away from any aspect of it, whatever area it was, whatever you had to look at. You said earlier it's not easy. It's I kind of say, I just want to add for people that are viewing, it's definitely not easy, but neither is holding on to them. Like when people go, oh, it's just easier to hold on to the beliefs. I didn't find that. My life was just miserable when I was doing that. But can you take us through a journey as we, it's a great way to probably
Mm.
summarize. Well, as you've done that through the years, what's happened with life in various aspects? What can you share with us of, like, where you were then, and where you are now? I think you've done some of that already, but if you put it in sort of a nutshell, what would you say, in terms of where you were and where the journey's got you, taken you so far?
I think, early on starting the journey, by doing the work was very much in my early 20s. I was quite unconscious, and I think, throughout doing the work, I became more conscious, more aware, and I think the process of uncovering anything that's no longer serving you only helps you to be your more authentic self. And I think we're all striving to be more authentic, and we all want to feel amazing in our skin, and we all want to show up and help people and help and do good in the world. And so I think I recommend for anybody who is wanting to feel good within themselves, be self, then this kind of work is exactly what you need in order to do it. For me, lately I've just had some pretty profound realizations of just, yeah, how you learn to love yourself and feel good about yourself, how much more you attract into your life that you want. It's just so simple, even though it seems so hard to do. But like you said, it is actually harder to hold on to those things that don't serve you and those thoughts. And yeah, it's because they're just stories and your mind can play many tricks on you. And I think, once you figure out who your ego is, I call her Susan. Sometimes I'm like,
Yes,
shut
I've
up,
given her a name.
Susan. And I don't let those stories keep playing and playing, and I really stop them in their tracks, then you have so much control in your life, you know? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's I just recommend it for anybody just wanting to go on this journey.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. And yeah, the most inspiring and fulfilling thing for me in my work is just to watch the differences that when people do have the courage that you have and don't hide and confront and deal with the stories and question them, find out what's underneath it, what's true and what isn't true that's been running your life. And when I think about your journey over the last 11 years, like it really blows me away to see how far you've come in not just one or two areas, but in every aspect. And as you've said, particularly in who you are and how you do love yourself and how that's just radiating into everything that you do, including bringing this amazing brand of Into Wellness, so other people can benefit from the physical health side of things. Mecca's not a small place to get your products into, and so just the things that you're now doing for yourself, for others, it's just been such an inspiring journey until now, and it's just been such an amazing experience. It's like I mean, you know, uh, I kind of just feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world because this is what I get to do for a living and just watch people do what you're doing. So, all is really left to say, Christie, is thank you again. Thank you for taking the time to be here to share your story. It's quite an amazing one, and I think
Mhm.
people will get so much out of listening to you, and hopefully they'll have the courage to be able to say, "Hey, look, I've got some things going on, and let me get honest about what they might be, and start taking a look at that." So, thanks for who you are, for everything you've done, and for coming on and sharing with us what you have today. It's been absolute gold. So, yeah, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rita. I really, really appreciate, yeah, chatting with you today. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you, and thanks everybody for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of How to Be a Real One Percenter.